so we are continuing on with dplyr. We left off on Monday. We covered select, which is for selecting columns, filter, which is for selecting rows, and mutate, which allows us to create new rows. Okay, and we said for mutate, the kinds of functions you want are window functions which take in a vector of values and return a vector of values. Okay, if you have something that takes in a vector of values and returns a single value, those are summary functions. Okay, which makes sense because the idea of a summary is you have less to look at than the original, right? So something like the mean, the median, or the variance, these are all summary functions in that they take a bunch of numbers and return a single number. So here, if we look at the column amount, and we wanted to summarize these 6 values with a single value such as the median, we could do that. And the command in dplyr would be to feed pollution into the function summarize, and we would say create a variable or a column called median, and the way you're going to calculate that is taking the median of the column amount, and if you want to create a column called variance, take variance of the column amount. Okay. Now at this point, it might not feel like this really does much because it's probably much easier just to say pollution $amount and put that inside the function median or the function variance, and you'll get back single values. And that's probably what we are accustomed to doing. If somebody says take the mean of, you know, the amount, you would just extract that pollution $amount, and then you'd put the mean function around that. Okay. So at this point, it doesn't seem like this seems like a lot more work than what we might want to do. But the power of summarize comes with the ability to pair it with the group by function. But anyway, here's just another example. So here's taking the median and the variance. Here we can calculate the mean, the sum, and how many values we have, n. Okay, and this would be, you know, and for each of these we have to name the column. So here we're naming the column mean, we're naming the column sum, and we're naming the column here n. But these names are arbitrary. If we want to call it average, equals, mean, this part over here before the equal sign is an arbitrary label. So you can give it pretty much any character string that you want there. And then you say it's equal, and then this part is the R formula or R code to calculate that, right? How are we doing this? We are taking the mean of the column amount. If we had other variables, such as amount, and then such as, I don't know, some other, you know, count or something, okay? You could have, you know, average amount and then average count, or mean amount, count, and you'd have to have different formulas for each of those things, right? So, you know, this just happens to be dealing with the column amount. And then over here we have n. N is just how many rows are being summarized, and that's n. It doesn't take in an argument because it doesn't care. Okay, so these are some of the functions. So these are all functions we've seen: min, max, mean, median, sum, variance, and standard deviation. All of these take a vector of values and return a single value. But you can also use these in dplyr. N will tell you the number of values in the vector that's being summarized, but you can also ask what's the first or the last, the nth or the n distinct, or something like that. Okay, although to be honest, probably you'll use most of these. N being the exception, you use n quite a bit, I think. So again, summary functions, you take the vector and it returns a single value. Okay, so here's just some examples of using the function arrange. Okay, and so here we are arranging it by wind speed. Okay, and so the default usage of a range is that it will go increasing, and if you want it decreasing, you would just say arrange, and then you would say descending, and then of that column. So here now it puts the largest values up top. Okay. And then if you have multiple columns to go by, you can throw in a second criteria. So you can say arrange by wind, and then in the event of a tie, break the tie using date. So in this case, you'll notice that Alex and Arthur both have wind speeds of 45, so they are tied, and so the arrangement here is generally the arrangement that was originally in the original data frame. So Alex came before Arthur here, so Alex comes before Arthur here. But we could say break the ties using date, and then now it will put the smaller date above the larger date with a range. So you can give it multiple columns to kind of do that, right? And we're accustomed to this, right? Your names in the roster are arranged by last name, and if there's multiple of you with the same last name, then we arrange by the first name. And that's usually enough. And then if not, we'll go by middle initial, and then I don't know what we would use next, but then we would have two people with the same name and middle initial, and that happens, but yeah, who gets precedence, right? Okay. Oh, and then pipe operators. Okay, so this is all stuff we've seen, right? Okay, so we'll skip all of this. Mutate and Control-Shift-M. Okay. Unit of analysis. Okay, so the unit of analysis is basically the row, right? So here, when we are looking at this, we've got 6 rows here, and we might want to just summarize everything, all 6 values here, into right here. We've got the mean is 42, and the sum is 252, and the number of rows that we've summarized is 6. Okay. Again, we can do something in dplyr called group by. All right. And with group by, we might say, you know what? I don't want the summary for all 6 numbers. I mean, that's useful, but you know what? I actually want to know. I want to split this up by city. I want to group the New York values together, I want to group the London values together, and I want to group the Beijing values together, okay? And so we can do group by, and then if we fed it into the same summarize function of taking the mean and the sum, we would get something like this. The mean of these 2 values is 18.5. The sum of those 2 values is that, and how many values did we summarize there? We summarized 2 values, okay? And so this is something that we often find ourselves wanting to do. We've got some kind of categorical variable, right? And, you know, it will say, you know, in your data, it'll say, you know, this observation belongs to this group, and this observation belongs to the same group, and this observation over here belongs to another group. And maybe you want to summarize based on the different groups, okay? And this is where group by comes in handy. So if you, to do group by, all you have to do is you take your original data frame or your original data set and you feed it into the group by function. And you say, I want to group by which variable? I want to group by city. So in this case, it's going to create, it's going to look at the city, and it's going to say, see 3 unique values. It's got New York, London, Beijing. It's going to create 3 groups. And this is illustrated on this slide as having 3 different colors here. But when you throw it into R and you look at the result of group by, it doesn't look like much has changed. So actually I have to load up. Okay, so here's, oh sorry, let me magnify things for you. Okay, so this is our original pollution data set, 6 rows, and it looks like this. And over here, I can just take pollution and feed it into group by, and we're going to group by city. Okay? And the output of this looks almost exactly the same, but the key difference here is that it says groups, city, 3 groups. Okay? So that's the key difference. So even though kind of the output here looks exactly the same, the change has happened in that this now says there are 3 groups, and they're grouped 3 groups, and it's grouped by city. So that's kind of the key change here. Okay? All of this gets made powerful when we pair the group by function with summarize. Okay? So here, I'm going to take pollution, we're going to group by city, and then we will throw this into the summarize function. I'm going to say pollution group by city, and then we want to create summarize, and what are the ones? Mean is equal to mean of the amount column, and sum is equal to sum of the amount column, and n will just be number of rows. And then when I do this, it identifies, okay, you had 3 groups, Beijing, London, New York, and it returns the mean, the sum, and the number. That number of rows that was summarized there. Okay, so this is group by. Group by paired with summarize. Okay. If we didn't have this, how would we do something like this in base R? It's a much more challenging thing. You'd have to probably do something like T apply to pollution, and now I don't know how to do this. Okay. See, I've drawn. Let me ask for help on T apply, and index x function. Okay, so I think I would do T apply. Index. Do it by city, and then the function is mean. Object. Let's see. Okay, so you'd have to do something like this. T apply pollution. This is the thing that we want. We're going to try to break it up by city or mean. Maybe S. I don't know if S apply would work. Yeah, S apply would not work. Okay, so that would do it for T apply, but then you'd have to do it for the other ones, right? Sum as well. Okay, so these things, it does work. It's just it's a little bit more difficult. There's also the aggregate function. How does aggregate work? I think I want to do I must be a list. Okay, hang on. All right. I can't even recall how to do this using the aggregate function. It can be done, but it's a lot more painful to do it using this. I mean, here the code just makes sense, right? You take the original data. What are we going to do? We're going to group by city, and then we feed that into the summarize function. Okay, so the summarize function just said you're defining your columns. Here we're saying mean, sum, and n, and we are defining them by the formula with which we use to calculate those things. Okay, so here we've got pollution grouped by city, summarize, mean, amount. So group by applies the grouping. So here that's symbolized by these 3 colors, and then each of those colors, each of those groups will create one row in our summary table. If instead we grouped by size, this would create two groups, okay? A group for large and a group for small. And so each of those values would get its own row here. And so here we have pollution grouping by size, and it calculates the mean amount there. So you can group by city, you can group by size, or any other categorical variable, and every unique row will get its own entry in the summary table. Okay? If ever you need to get rid of the grouping, you can use the variable, the function ungroup, right? And that turns it back into an ungrouped data frame here. Here's an example using a tuberculosis data set. Okay, so here it says we've got country, we've got the year, and then the sex, and then the number of cases here. Okay, it seems like semi-artificial, so it just says, you know, in our data frame we've got Afghanistan in 99 and 2000, Brazil in 99, 2000, China in 99 and 2000, and then male, female. So we can, if we group by country and then by year, okay, this will create a total of 6 separate groups, okay? So here we have a total of 12 rows, but if we group by country and then by year, it's going to create 6 groups. It's going to create Afghanistan 99, Afghanistan 2000. So country and then by year, it does that. And so we've got 6 groups, and if we feed that into summarize, and we just say add up the number of cases, it's going to add up the values here. So 1 and 1 make 2, 1 and 1 make 2, you know, 2 and 2. So it sums those up. So again, 6 groups, each group gets its own row, and we have a total of 6 rows in our summary table. If we further applied summarize again, okay, because we have kind of 2 tiers of groupings, right? We've got group by country and then group by year. What this does is that, you know, after it creates these 6 groups, it can say, well, I could further summarize and then collapse the year, and then we will be left with 3 countries, Afghanistan, Brazil, and China, okay? If instead I said group by year and then country, and then I did summarize, I would get the same resulting table here, but then the second application of summarize would then produce a table of how many rows? 2 rows, 1 for 99 and 1 for the year 2000, right? So if I go back, we look at TB here, and that's probably too much. Okay, I'm looking at a different data set here. Let me see. Okay, let me filter this so that year is equal to, or okay, so this is what we have here, and let me just save this TB2. Okay, so this is the data set that we've got. We've got country, year, sex, child, adult, and elderly. So it looks like the numbers are a little bit different, but this is what we have. So if I feed this into group by, and we can group by country and then by year, I can then run summarize. And so summarize here, I can just do cases is equal to sum of, we'll do, I guess, adult, okay? But I could also create another another column, cases C, which will be sum of child, and cases E, which will be sum of elderly. Okay, and so summarizing it that way, we end up getting 6 groups. Okay, and then if I further feed this into the same summarize function, summarize, I guess now we'll have to have cases equal to sum of cases, and cases underscore C equal to sum of cases C and cases E. Okay, and we would get 3 here. So because I grouped by country and then I grouped by year. I'll copy all of this. Okay, and if I make just the small change of, we're going to have the same command here, but this time I group by year and then I group by country, then the resulting table gives me a value for 99 and then a value for 2000. Okay, so these are different in terms of if I feed it through 2 summarize statements. Okay, if I group it by year and then by country, and I feed it into just 1 summarize statement, this is equal to this, the primary difference being in the way that it's arranged. Right. So here it's pretty much the same. I did year and then country, and I said add up the adult cases, child cases, and elderly cases, and it has given us the same results, except here it's arranged by country and then by year, and over here, because I said group by year then country, it's arranged by year and then by country, which makes sense. So when you apply the group by, it also gives our kind of a default arrangement scheme, in that it's going to arrange the resulting table by the way the groups have been created as well. Right. Why do I have 3 groups?
What if you have 3 grouping variables?
3 grouping variables? Yeah, you could have 3 grouping variables. So in our original data, if we just look at TB2, we really only have 3 categorical variables. So I could use all 3 categorical variables as grouping variables, but then I would end up getting the same table back, right? Because using all 3 categorical variables would produce a total of 12 different groups, and so throwing that first into summarize it's going to just give me back the same. But yeah, you could do that as well. So if I just took this and I said country, year, and then sex, then it gives me back first all 12, but kind of arranged into the, I guess it's exactly the same as what I had before. But then if I fed it back into, threw this into a summarize function, where we're going to summarize this kind of summarize it at a second level. So same thing here, we'll summarize it there. So now it does that, and then I summarize it further, and then if I summarize it even further, then it boils it all down to just 1, right? So here, so it starts off, I've grouped by country, year, then sex, okay? So that's going to return back all 12 rows. And then if I summarize, apply a summarize on that, it will get rid of the last variable, and it will have groups by country and then year. And then if I summarize it even further, then it will group just by country. And then if I summarize that even further, then there's no grouping, and it just boils it down to a single value for each. Right? Yes?
So basically, it just takes away 1 variable. So if it only has by 3, then it takes away sex, and then it takes away year.
Yeah. it's taking away, you're grouping variables one at a time, kind of from the least important one that you've listed, and but it's not just deleting it, it's just summarizing it without that variable. So it just keeps collapsing the groups if you continue to apply summarize things. Now this is probably ill-advised. You probably, if you're gonna have to do, feed it through summarize 4 times, you should just think like, what should the original groups be that I want to use, and then and do it that way. But the option is there, and it does work in that case here. Okay, and yeah, if we were to apply summarize one more time to this, then it would just add these two, all 3 of these values together and return 24. Oh, and it does that right there, right? So it shrinks this down, so on and so forth. Okay, so here it says we can extract variables using select and filter, arrange the observations with arrange, make new variables with mutate, and group observations using group by, and summarize. Okay. Before we get into that joining data section, which I'm comfortable just leaving entirely, I've linked to this blog entry that this person wrote, Tony Fischetti. It says how dplyr replaced my most common R idioms. Okay, and so I'm not sure how much R you've had prior to using dplyr. So as for me, I had to do everything in base R for quite a while, and then dplyr came along, and then once I learned dplyr, I realized how much easier it has made certain things, and so this kind of provides a little comparison of some of the functions that you might want to do, and how dplyr makes it a lot easier, right? So the data that we're using is this crime state by state CSV, okay? And so if I read that in, it's got 16,422 observations. And so let me just give you kind of the head here, and it says this is the kind of data that it has, and yeah, it's a bit morbid here, but it says in Alabama, there's the type of crime is violent crime, and the crime is murder and non-negligent manslaughter, and there were 406 incidents of that in Alabama. Okay, and we might want to just out of curiosity, we can do crime by state $ type of crime, and we can just ask for the unique values of that. Okay, and there's either violent crime or property crime, and then we could ask, what are the types of crimes that we have, and we have, all sorts of stuff. And okay, so this data set exists here, and we can we might want to just look at 1 year, and we can say, I just want to look at the state of New York in the year 2005. Okay, with base R, you would have to use subsetting here, and we could use bracket subsetting, and we would say, okay, we would want the combination. This would return a true-false vector, and then this over here would return a true-false vector, and we want where both of those are true. So we would say crime by state where year is equal to 2005, and crime by state state is equal to New York, and this gets fed into a new frame that we've created, and this is going to be crime _ New York 2005, and we can just kind of check this crime New York 2005, and it says there are 7 rows and 5 columns here. Okay. Over here we have if we did dplyr, that's pretty simple. We just do we're going to filter crime by state where state is equal to New York and year is equal to 2005. Okay, and so we can do that. And if we asked for the dimensions on this thing, we get the same result, 7 by 5. If we wanted to arrange these by a particular variable, we can just do arrange crime New York 2005, arrange descending count if we're using dplyr, okay? And we can see this, okay? Whereas in base R, we would have to use the function order, okay? And we would say order is which variable are we going to use to create the order? We will use crime New York 2005 count, and then decrease equals true. And keep in mind that when you do order, it tells you if you want to put this into order, you're going to have to, well, it's already been arranged because I already ran it through dplyr. But so keep in mind the function order tells you the rows, the indices that you would use to put them into order. So it'd say, you know, this one would go first and this one would go last, things like that. And then so we would put that into basically our bracket subsetting to say put the rows in this order and then and all the columns. So if we do that, we would get this, and it arranges it as such. Okay. Same thing with dplyr, and again, so this is what we have. Okay. If we just wanted to select the columns, okay, and we just want, we're going to go with a type of crime and the count, okay, then that's easy. In both base R and dplyr, both of these are quite easy to do. So, you know, we would get property crime and violent crime over here. With dplyr, we would use the function select, and we would get the same results there. With to create a new variable, okay? With base R, if we wanted to create a new variable called proportion, all right, we would take in this case, we're going to do the count divided by the sum. So we're just basically taking the total sum of this and creating a kind of a proportion value. Okay, so we would do we can do this using base R by saying you know, $proportion. Base R recognizes, you know, this is a column that doesn't exist in our data set, so we have to make a new one. And the way we would calculate this is take our crime New York 2005 data set, take the count column, divide that by the sum of this, and go on and so on and so forth. So, you know, we could do that easily. Doing that, this is how it would work using base R. But with dplyr, it's even easier in that we just say mutate. Which data set are we going to mutate? We would do this. You know, probably if I wrote it, I would just use the kind of the pipe command, and we would pipe it into mutate, and we'd say the new column I want to create is proportion, and this is done by taking the count and dividing it by the sum of the count, right? So this is how that would go. Okay, and then with aggregation, oh, this is how we would do it. In base R, you would say count as a formula of type of crime, and we would want to take the sum and count as a formula of type of crime, and here we would do function length, being kind of would say there are three types of property crime and 4 types of violent crime as recorded in this data set. Okay, and we would have summary 1 would aggregate this, and kind of the summary that we would have here is that if I did summary 2, it would say this, you know, 3 types of that. Okay, and then we would kind of merge these together by using the property crime and violent crime as our matching thing. So we would do summary of this, and so here is what we would get right here. Okay. With dplyr, again, we can use the group by and summarize function. So here we're going to do group by, and so we'll say summarize. I think probably piping makes the most sense here. We'll just do crime.newyork.2005. We'll pipe that into the group by. Type of crime, and then we'll pipe this into summarize. And I'll pipe that in here, okay, and then again we get the summary. So I think dplyr especially makes this kind of this split, summarize, and merge back together a lot easier. Yeah.
Did when we use the merge function in Pixar? Can we name the new columns or not? Besides, like, count X and
Yeah. Let's see. I'm not sure. You might have to do. Yeah, you might have to just create a new. You might have to do it after the fact. Okay. Okay. So again, and then the last bit I think kind of builds it all and just showcases the advantage of dplyr. Okay. So if in base R we would have to kind of create all of these incremental data sets along the way and it's basically just all of the different things that we've done. With dplyr, we can just kind of start off here and then just feed it into each other, right? So we'll start by our original data set. We'll filter down to the specific state and year. We'll arrange it by descending. Then we select the columns we want. We'll create our new column. We'll throw it into group by, and then we'll throw it into summarize. And when we do this, we get the exact table that we were creating earlier. Okay, so with dplyr, we just have. I think it just makes our lives a lot easier in terms of having to, especially trying to create summaries based on groups. That functionality has been made much more easy using dplyr. Okay, there's a few last slides on joining data. I'll allow you guys to kind of flip through this on your own time. We're looking at binding the rows or binding the columns. We can look at the union or the intersection of two different data sets. Okay, and these. So dplyr basically just expands these set functions of union and intersect to work with data frames. Okay. And then I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with left joins, inner joins, or whatnot. They are ways to kind of match things. This is something, if you've ever dealt with SQL, this is something that comes up a lot. I think this stuff probably makes more sense when we, if we were to mention work with SQL, but that's outside of the scope of our course. So I'll allow you guys to flip through these slides on your own time here, but they talk about using the join features of dplyr. Okay, we'll end here, and we'll see you guys on Friday then. So.